My next guest, what's your name and what brings you to JCON?
Okay, so my name is Arjan Tijms, and I'm manning the booth here at the Eclipse Foundation, and I present Jakarta EE and Glassfish. So that's what brings me to the conference today.
So, and hoping to meet the Java community, I guess.
Yeah, of course. So we always like to talk to the community, ask what they use, ask what they want, how we can help them. So I represent also my company, which is OmniFish. And with OmniFish, we provide support, services, consultancy where needed. And if people have issues with Jakarta EE or with Glassfish specifically, also with other Glassfish, or with other Jakarta EE runtimes, we can help them with
Mhm.
that.
What are the most important evolutions that people should know from the Eclipse Foundation?
The evolutions, like how it
Yeah,
changed
what's
over the
what new
years.
what new things are you supporting and building?
Yeah, so at the moment with the Eclipse Foundation and the Jakarta EE working group, we're working towards Jakarta EE 11, which is the second feature release
Hmm.
that we're working on. So, um, as maybe people know, or maybe they don't know, Jakarta EE evolved from Java EE.
Hmm.
Java EE had been at Oracle, before that at Sun. Um, it evolved over the years to become like a quite interesting framework. But then at some point, Oracle kind of lost interest in it, or they didn't want to spend so
Hmm.
much for it anymore, so they transferred it to the Eclipse Foundation.
Yeah.
And that, in a way, was like really good for the community because a lot of things were like really open source, and the foundation is a vendor neutral thing. Like the Eclipse Foundation is of course vendor neutral, so the
Hmm.
specifications, the APIs are the ownership of the Eclipse Foundation, and then companies, vendors can implement them or can maintain an open source implementation as we do.
Hmm.
But the entire thing is owned by a foundation, and it's open source, and the process is you could call it an open API
Yeah.
process. Like everybody can contribute to evolve the API, and that makes Jakarta EE quite special. And that was a good thing for the community that was so open and so vendor neutral. Um, on the other hand, the transfer took a long time.
Yeah. And people may know it because they had to change package imports from Java X to Jakarta, correct?
Yes,
But I think a lot of that is also hidden because it's also part of a lot of frameworks. It's also in Spring, I guess.
yes,
So actually, Spring hides a bit that this transition happened within Spring, for instance.
yeah. So in Spring specifically, Spring hides a couple of things, but also still like applications do import the
Hmm.
Javax namespace, which mean they still have to do the transition.
Yeah.
So we have a few, or the company, we had a few suggestions about how to change the namespace, how to do that, which tools you could use for that. So if anybody wants to have more details about that, to look it up online.
I
Um,
guess Open Rewrite is one of them.
yeah,
Yeah.
Open Rewrite, the Eclipse Transformer, just search and replace is of course always an option. It's a bit more,
Yeah.
you
A
have to
bit
be
more
a bit
work.
more careful, a bit more work, but it's still an
Yeah.
option if you want to do it manually. If your application is not too
Yeah.
big, you can do it
Yeah.
that way.
And so we had at some point the transition from Java X to Jakarta, which was
Yes,
just a drop-in replacement, no new features. Now you say you're going to Jakarta 11.
yes,
What are the new things coming in there?
yeah. So we have a lot of good changes in persistence. Jakarta persistence added a lot of new small features, but very convenient to use. We have extended support for JDK 21 with the virtual threads in
Yep.
concurrency. It's with a small catch since we also are still compatible with JDK 17. So it's not
Yeah.
guaranteed
Yeah.
that your application gets a virtual thread, but it's there with Jakarta validation. It was previously called bean validation, but now just validation. And we support records with security. Jakarta security, it's now possible to use multiple authentication mechanisms, which are the things like Form or Basic or OpenID. And we introduced a new handler where you can, it's a bit technical, but you can inject multiple authentication mechanisms like Basic or Form or maybe two different forms, and then your application can route requests to different mechanisms
Mhm.
when needed. It's still a bit manual. The plan was to do it automatically, but the basic foundations are there.
Mhm. You said the migration to virtual threads, and you have to be on Java 21 for that.
Yes.
Do you think Java 21 will be picked up faster compared to previous versions because of that kind of evolutions, like virtual threads?
I did think so. At least I hope so, for starters. And there's always a bit of a debate in the community. How do we get people to JDK 21 or to higher
Newer, yeah.
JDKs in general? So there's two groups of people basically within the community, within the vendor and library community. One says, okay, well, we have to support everything, so we support even down to JDK 6 if possible. Others say, well, we need to be an example and we need to change to newer JDK versions faster. So
Yeah.
we kind of smooth the path and give people a reason to upgrade. If everything stays compatible with JDK 6
Yeah.
for ages, then people and companies might not feel the pressure to update so much, and
Yeah.
then the entire ecosystem stays at JDK 6.
Yeah.
Or in this case, maybe JDK 8.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then we forcefully say, okay, well, now the minimum is going to be JDK 11 or JDK 17, and then it gives people more of an impulse to upgrade.
Yeah, I know it's a very difficult decision for a lot of companies who have legacy applications, but on the other hand, you have developer improvements, you have code improvements, you have runtime improvements.
Yes, exactly.
So there are very good reasons
Yeah,
to
there are very
upgrade.
good reasons, and we had this with the update in Jakarta EE 11 to JDK 17 as a minimum. And of course, some people ask, well, you have this API like Jakarta Persistence, and there's nothing in the API that requires JDK 17. The API is just, it doesn't use JDK 17 features. You can compile the API, I think, still with JDK 7 probably. But then, of course, the reason is that there's a guarantee that all implementations are at least JDK 17.
Can work with it.
So by limiting what you support as a spec, you actually give more guarantees.
Yeah.
And there's this balance that not always everybody understands, or maybe they do understand, but they have different reasons. But as a spec, the tighter you are, the less things you support, the more guarantees you give. So if you would say, okay, well, we do the spec at JDK 21, then you would have to guarantee that every implementation supports JDK 21 because that's the minimum. Currently, we are at 17 and 21.
Yeah.
So whenever you have a generic Jakarta EE application or a library, you can't compile it to JDK 21 because it will not work on those systems that use JDK 17.
Yeah, and that's why people have to come to a conference like this to learn about all these new features and all the evolutions going on in Java, Jakarta, and all the other technologies.
Exactly. So we often talk about those new features. We write blog postings telling people, okay, these things are new, and we hope that people enjoy them, of course.
Okay, that's a nice message to conclude. Thanks a lot for this interview.
You're
have
welcome.
a lot of fun here.
We will.
And have a lot of conversations with the community.
Absolutely.